Be smart, and please put all you can into those pledge cards right now. Well, it's my pleasure as you're finishing that to pivot here to the conversation, and we're just really honored to have three great luminaries of the world of early learning with us today. And I think all our panelists are known to you, and their full biographies are in the program, but I just want to say a word about each of them. To my right immediately here is my friend Doreen Cato, who for more than 12 years now has been the director of the First Place School. Most of you know, is a school working with homeless and other challenged youth in our community, and she has been tireless in her work at the school, but also as an advocate nationally and internationally for the power of early learning and children's rights. She's been engaged in education advocacy for over 35 years and has served on a whole range of boards and commissions, including the King County Charter Review Commission, Stand for Children, and the Children's Alliance Public Policy Committee. So welcome, Doreen. Next to Doreen, we're privileged to be joined today by Dimitri Christakis, who is a physician, a professor of pediatrics and director of the Child Health Program at the University of Washington, and as well a pediatrician at the Children's Hospital here in Seattle. He's an international expert on children and the media, and his work there on the impacts of development and early learning of the media, television, and all forms of media has been featured nationally on the Today Show, the New York Times, and other media venues. And his voice and his ability to crystallize his research in ways that impact parents and caregivers and educators is really quite powerful. So welcome, Dimitri. And last but not least, we're joined also by Charlie Gildner, who is the, has many hats, and it's actually quite exciting to have somebody here who representing so many different communities. Charlie's been a banker for 25 years and is the Executive Vice President and Chief Credit Officer for People's Bank. And that alone is wonderful to have such a leader in the business community so engaged in this conversation. But that's not where it stops for Charlie. He's also active in his local community in early learning and education generally as president of the Mount Vernon School Board and as a co-chair of the Skagit Early Learning Coalition. So Charlie, welcome. Thank you for being here. Dimitri, I'd like to actually start with you if we could, because one of the things that is important for us to do as we start this conversation is just to frame up our terms. We've been talking about early learning, early childhood education, and you often use the simple term that kids are born learning. Tell us a little bit about what you mean by born learning and what that means for us as we think about the impact of the work that the Foundation and others do.
Thanks. First of all, let me say it's a pleasure to be here. I joined the board about a year ago because I wanted to be amongst people that shared my passion for early learning, and it's wonderful to be in a room with so many more people that share my passion for it. So I don't have a lot of time to answer a question I could speak about for an hour, and so I'd like to start by putting up a slide. Joel, can you put up the slide for me? Joel? You're wasting my time, Joel. So this is a slide, actually, of a one-day-old infant listening to music. And you can see on the very far left there that she's listening to Mozart, and that's her breathing pattern in response to it. And then Stravinsky is put on, and you can see that her breathing actually changes. And then Mozart comes back on, and you can see that her breathing actually goes back to what it was like before. Now, you might argue this is a one-day-old kind of critiquing classical music, but I would argue that it shows at a minimum that even from one day of life, babies are actually showing a physiological response to what they're hearing. And this is what it means to be born learning. The newborn brain triples in size in the first 2 years of life, and it does that in direct response to external stimulation, whether it's Mozart or Stravinsky or somebody speaking to you, somebody reading to you, somebody singing to you. All of those experiences actually help the brain to grow and to function over the entire lifespan. So what are those kinds of things that are good? Well, I'd like to talk about some of the things that aren't so good, and we saw some of them in the video. There's been an explosion of products lately that claim to make children smarter. This explosion of baby DVDs that claim that time spent with them is better than time spent with parents. And the research that I've done and that others have done have actually shown exactly the opposite, that the time that children spend with television, that infants spend with television, actually comes at great detriment to them. It slows their language, it shortens their attention span, it reduces their cognitive function. And although I didn't set out to take on Disney around Baby Einstein, that's apparently what's happening to me. But I think the important point for all of us here, and I'll shut up because I'm sure I'm out of time, is that we do know the kinds of things that really do make differences, in meaningful differences in the everyday lives of children. And the challenge for us is to help people to actually do them. And I'll stop.
Thank you, Dimitri. Let me add as well here, we're so 21st century here at the Foundation. I neglected to mention that we're going to leave a little bit of time after this conversation for a couple of questions from the audience. And the way that we've asked you to submit those questions is by texting us, sending us a text message. Yeah, this is cool. So you can participate if you've got a burning question here by texting panel and your question to 66746. And make sure you get those numbers right so you don't inadvertently donate to some cause or send a question to some unsuspecting teenager somewhere. But please do think about how you want to participate. Doreen, I want to follow up on what Dimitri was just saying here. This example, this very telling example of the mythologies that built around Baby Einstein and products that are similar, is a real great crystallization of how confusing it can be, even for parents who have all the time and resource to be super engaged, to be paying attention to this stuff, to be following what's in the newspaper and the research, to be talking to their children's educators. For so many of the kids you work with at First Place, so many of these vulnerable children, their parents don't have that luxury. Their caregivers and the adults in their lives don't have that wherewithal. And when we talk about kids being kindergarten ready, what is it that you find helps the parents of the kids you work with just to navigate their way through what you can do, what you can't do, what you should do, what you shouldn't do, what this research says? How do you try to guide them through that?
Very good question. Can you hear me?
We can now.
Okay. I'm going to speak about three things. One, I was at the Institute Children, Poverty, and Homelessness. I sat at a round table and spoke to many, many people who are dealing with this very issue. I also want to speak about Kenya and Ethiopia, where I had an opportunity to work with Cultural Reconnection and go to the schools and see how they're working with their children. And I've gone as far as very rural areas in Ethiopia and also saw those who have no electricity or running water, how they dealt with the same issue. And so to begin with, just to give some stats real quick, a lot of you might not know, courtesy of Thrive by Five, I had learned that 17% of the children in King County from age birth to 8 are in poverty. Now compare that to 11% in the state of Washington. That's a lot. And at First Place, all of our children are either the poorest of poor or low income.